3 years ago, I flew home from Dubai after working as a head nurse at an international hospital. I had saved every penny, sent money back monthly, and dreamed of finally retiring with my mother on our family's peach orchard in Georgia. But when I pulled into the driveway unannounced, I found my 72-year-old mother on her hands and knees in the August heat, scrubbing the porch steps with a toothbrush. My brother's wife stood over her, arms crossed, barking orders like she was training a dog. "You missed a spot, Patricia. Do it again." My mother didn't even look up. She just kept scrubbing, her arthritic fingers white-knuckled around that tiny brush. I didn't scream. I stepped out of the rental car, and my sister-in-law's face went pale as milk. But before I tell you what happened next, let me take you back to the beginning, because this story isn't just about betrayal. It's about the day I learned that the people who are supposed to love you can become the very ones who destroy you. I'm the oldest of 2 children. My brother Kevin is 4 years younger, and growing up, I was his protector. When bullies picked on him in middle school, I was the one who marched into that cafeteria and made them apologize. When he failed algebra, I tutored him every night until he passed. When he married Diane, a woman with champagne tastes and a beer budget, I paid for half their wedding because our mother couldn't afford it alone after Daddy passed. Our family owned 40 acres of peach orchards just outside of Macon. It wasn't fancy, but it was home. The farmhouse had been in our family for 4 generations, built by my great-grandfather with his own hands. Every summer, the trees would bloom pink and white, and the air would smell so sweet you could taste it. Mama loved that land more than anything in the world except her children. When I got the nursing job in Dubai 12 years ago, the money was too good to refuse. I could earn in 1 year what would take 5 years back home. So I made a deal with Kevin. I would send money every month to help with Mama's care and the upkeep of the farm. In return, he and Diane would move into the farmhouse and look after Mama. It seemed perfect. Kevin had just lost his job at the auto plant, and Diane was pregnant with their first child. They needed a place to live, and Mama needed help around the house. Everyone won. Or so I thought. For the first few years, everything seemed fine. I'd call Mama every Sunday, and she'd tell me about the grandkids, about the peaches, about how Kevin was finally getting his life together. But around year 5, things started to change. Mama's voice became quieter. She'd forget what she was saying mid-sentence. When I asked to speak to Kevin, he was always out or busy. Diane would grab the phone and give me quick updates, her voice sugary sweet but somehow hollow. I told myself Mama was just getting older. I told myself the distance was playing tricks on my mind. I told myself a lot of things because the truth was too terrible to consider. Then the calls stopped. When I tried to reach the house, the number was disconnected. When I tried Kevin's cell, it went straight to voicemail. For 8 months, I heard nothing. I filed missing persons reports from overseas, but the police said Mama was fine, that Kevin had explained I was estranged from the family due to a financial dispute. I was frantic, but what could I do from 7,000 miles away? So I quit my job, cashed out my retirement, and flew home. Which brings me back to that August afternoon, standing in the driveway of my own family's farm, watching my mother scrub steps on her hands and knees while my sister-in-law treated her like a servant. Diane spotted me first. Her eyes went wide, and for a split second, I saw something flicker across her face. Not guilt, not shame, fear, pure, animal fear. "Linda," she said, her voice pitched high and false. "What a surprise. We weren't expecting you." I didn't respond to her. I walked straight to my mother and knelt down beside her. Up close, I could see how much she'd changed. She'd lost at least 30 pounds. Her hair, once silver and thick, was now thin and patchy. Her house dress was stained and torn at the hem. But worst of all were her eyes. They were cloudy, unfocused, like she was looking at me through frosted glass. "Mama," I whispered, taking the toothbrush from her trembling hands. "It's me. It's Linda. I'm home." She stared at me for a long moment. Then, slowly, like sunrise breaking through clouds, recognition flickered in her eyes. Her lips moved, forming words that never came. And then she grabbed my hand with more strength than I thought she had left and squeezed tight. "You came," she breathed. "You finally came." Before I could respond, Kevin appeared in the doorway. My baby brother, the one I'd protected all his life, stood there in a polo shirt and pressed khakis, looking like he'd just stepped off a golf course. He was holding a glass of sweet tea, the ice cubes clinking softly. "Well, well," he said, not moving to help our mother up from the ground. "The prodigal sister returns." He took a long sip of his tea. "You should have called first. We could have tidied up." I helped Mama to her feet. She leaned against me, frail as a baby bird. I could feel every bone in her body through that thin house dress. "What have you done to her?" I asked, my voice steady even though fury was building in my chest like a summer storm. Kevin laughed. It was a sound I didn't recognize, cold and dismissive. "Done to her? We've taken care of her. Fed her, housed her, managed her affairs. All while you were off living your fancy life in the desert, sending a few dollars and thinking that made you a good daughter. I sent $1,500 every month for 12 years, and we spent it on her care." Kevin shrugged. "Medical bills, groceries, property taxes, you think any of that is cheap? If anything, you still owe us." Diane had recovered from her shock and now stood beside her husband, a unified front. "Patricia is just confused," she said, patting my mother's arm with false tenderness. "The dementia, you know. Some days she thinks she's Cinderella." We play along to keep her calm. I looked at my mother. She was staring at the ground, shoulders hunched, silent. Whatever fire had flickered in her eyes when she recognized me had gone out, replaced by something hollow and beaten. "I want to see her room," I said. Kevin stepped in front of the door. "That's not a good idea. She gets agitated when her routine is disrupted." "Get out of my way, Kevin." Something in my voice must have surprised him because he actually stepped aside. I guided Mama into the house, with Diane and Kevin trailing behind us like shadows. The farmhouse looked different. The worn but cozy furniture I remembered from childhood had been replaced with expensive leather sofas and glass coffee tables. A massive flat-screen TV dominated the living room. New hardwood floors gleamed where Mama's hand-woven rugs used to lie. They'd renovated the whole place, probably using the money I'd sent. "Where does Mama sleep?" I asked. "Upstairs," Diane answered quickly. "In the guest room. We gave her the nicest room in the house." But Mama was tugging my hand, pulling me in a different direction, toward the back of the house, toward the old utility room where we used to store canning supplies. "Mama, no," Diane said sharply. "That's not your room. Your room is upstairs." But Mama kept pulling, and I followed. The utility room door had a padlock on the outside. A padlock on my mother's door. I looked at Kevin. He had the decency to look uncomfortable, but only for a moment. "She wanders at night," he explained. "It's for her own safety." I lifted the padlock. It was unlocked. I pushed the door open. The room was barely bigger than a closet. There was a cot in the corner with a thin, stained mattress, a bucket in the opposite corner. No windows. The walls were bare concrete, never finished when this part of the house was added decades ago. The smell hit me next, urine and mold and despair. This was where my mother had been sleeping. I turned to face my brother. 12 years of distance, of missed birthdays and lonely holidays, of trusting him with the most precious thing in my life, all of it crystallized into a single moment of absolute clarity. I saw him for what he was, a thief, a liar, a monster wearing my brother's face. "Get out," I said quietly. Kevin laughed again, but this time it sounded nervous. "Excuse me? This is my house now, has been for 3 years. Mama signed everything over to me, power of attorney, the deed, all of it. You have no legal standing here. Get out. Call the sheriff if you want." Kevin pulled out his phone. "Actually, I'll call him myself. You're the one trespassing." I didn't argue. I had learned a long time ago that when you're outnumbered and outgunned, you don't fight head-on. You wait. You watch. You gather ammunition. "Fine," I said. "I'll leave, but I'm taking Mama with me." "The hell you are." Diane stepped forward. "She's not competent to make decisions. Kevin is her legal guardian. If you try to remove her, we'll have you arrested for kidnapping." I looked at my mother. She was crying silently, tears running down her weathered cheeks. She squeezed my hand again, and I felt something press against my palm. A small, folded piece of paper. "I'll be back tomorrow," I said, loud enough for Kevin and Diane to hear. "With a lawyer." I hugged Mama, slipping the paper into my pocket as I did. Then I walked out of that house, got into my rental car, and drove away. In the rearview mirror, I saw Kevin standing on the porch, arms crossed, watching me go. He thought he'd won. He had no idea. I drove to the only motel in town, a rundown place called the Peach Blossom Inn. The sheets smelled like mothballs, and the air conditioner wheezed like an old man, but I didn't care. I sat on the edge of the bed and unfolded the paper Mama had pressed into my hand. The handwriting was shaky, barely legible, but I recognized it as my mother's. It was a list of dates and numbers, medical account numbers, insurance claim numbers, bank transaction codes, and at the bottom, 3 words that made my blood freeze. Basement, mason jar. I sat in that motel room for hours, staring at those words. Mama was telling me something, leaving me a trail of breadcrumbs even as her mind was being stolen from her. Whatever was in that mason jar was important enough that she'd hidden it, remembered it, and waited years to pass the message to someone who could use it. The next morning, I went to the county courthouse. I spent 4 hours digging through property records, medical liens, and financial disclosures. What I found made me sick. Kevin had taken out 3 mortgages on the farm, each one larger than the last. He'd liquidated Mama's retirement accounts, sold her jewelry, and cashed in a life insurance policy Daddy had left her. In total, over $800,000 had moved through accounts in Mama's name over the past 5 years. But the farm itself was now valued at only $200,000, with liens totaling nearly $300,000. He'd spent everything and gone into debt for more. I also found the guardianship papers. 3 years ago, a local judge had declared Mama mentally incompetent and granted Kevin full legal authority over her person and property. The doctor who signed off on the competency evaluation was a man named Dr. Herbert Crane. I wrote down his name. That afternoon, I visited Dr. Crane's office. He was a nervous little man with a comb-over and sweaty palms. When I introduced myself as Patricia's daughter, he went pale. "Your brother handles all of Mrs. Patterson's affairs," he said quickly. "I can't discuss her case without his authorization." "I'm not asking you to discuss her case." I sat down across from him, uninvited. "I'm asking why a woman who was sharp as a tack 5 years ago is now a shell of herself. I'm asking what medications you prescribed. I'm asking why she's living in a concrete closet and scrubbing steps with a toothbrush." Dr. Crane's hands shook. "I don't know anything about that. I do what the family requests. What medications is she on?" He hesitated, then pulled up a file on his computer. His expression changed as he read, confusion flickering across his face. "This can't be right." "What?" "The prescriptions I wrote. The dosages have been altered, tripled in some cases. This would cause severe cognitive impairment, confusion, motor dysfunction." He looked up at me, genuinely horrified. "I didn't authorize this." I leaned forward. "Someone did." Dr. Crane's face went gray. "Your brother picks up the prescriptions. He said he was administering them as directed." I had my answer. Kevin wasn't just neglecting Mama. He was drugging her, keeping her foggy and compliant so she couldn't resist, couldn't remember, couldn't tell anyone what was really happening. "Dr. Crane," I said calmly, "you have 2 choices. You can help me fix this, testify if needed, and maybe keep your license. Or you can pretend this conversation never happened, and I promise you, when this all comes out, and it will come out, you'll lose everything. Your career, your reputation, your freedom." He swallowed hard. "What do you need me to do?" "First, write a new prescription. The correct dosages. I'll make sure she gets the right medicine from now on. Second, I need documentation. Everything you have on her case, every prescription, every appointment, every note." He nodded, already reaching for his prescription pad. I had my first ally. That night, I snuck back onto the farm. I knew every inch of that property, every creaky floorboard, every gap in the fence. I parked my car a mile down the road and walked through the peach trees in the moonlight, their branches heavy with fruit that would rot unpicked. The basement entrance was on the side of the house, behind the old storm cellar doors. I pulled them open slowly, praying the hinges wouldn't squeal. They didn't. Mama must have oiled them. preparing for this moment. The basement was pitch black. I used my phone's flashlight, picking my way through boxes of junk and old furniture. In the far corner, behind a stack of Daddy's old farming magazines, I found them. A dozen mason jars, the kind Mama used for canning peaches. I opened the first one. Inside, rolled up tight, were documents, bank statements, canceled checks, a copy of the original deed to the farm, and a letter, handwritten, dated 2 years ago. To whoever finds this, my name is Patricia Ann Patterson. I am of sound mind, despite what my son has told the doctors. Kevin is stealing from me. He forces me to sign papers I cannot read. His wife Diane makes me work like a slave and locks me in a room at night. I have hidden these documents because I know someday my daughter Linda will come home. She always comes when I need her. Linda, if you are reading this, I am sorry I could not fight harder. I love you. Do not let them win. I sat on the cold basement floor and cried. For the first time in years, I let myself break down completely. My mother, even as her mind was being stripped away, had thought of me, had trusted me, had kept fighting in the only way she could. I gathered every document, every scrap of evidence, and slipped back out into the night. Over the next week, I built my case. I found a lawyer in Atlanta who specialized in elder abuse. I got copies of the forged prescriptions. I documented the living conditions with photos. I tracked down 2 former caregivers Kevin had hired and fired. They both confirmed they'd been let go after raising concerns about Mama's treatment. One of them had even filed a report with Adult Protective Services, but somehow the case had been closed with no findings. I also discovered something else. Kevin was in deep trouble. He owed money to a land developer named Whitfield Properties. They wanted to buy the farm and turn it into a subdivision. The deal was worth $2 million, but Kevin couldn't sell without clearing the liens and getting full, uncontested ownership. That meant getting Mama completely out of the picture, either by having her declared fully incompetent in a permanent facility or, I suspected, by letting the drugged dosages do their work until she simply faded away. The sale was scheduled to close in 2 weeks. Whitfield was throwing a celebration party at the farm, a groundbreaking ceremony for their new development. All the county commissioners would be there. The mayor, the local newspaper. It was perfect. I waited. I kept sending Kevin friendly texts, pretending I'd given up, telling him I understood, asking if we could work something out. He responded with smug reassurances, offering me a small buyout if I signed away any claim to the property. I agreed to come to the party to discuss terms. The day of the celebration, I arrived early. The farm had been transformed. White tents dotted the lawn. A catering truck was parked near the barn. Waiters in crisp uniforms carried trays of champagne. It looked nothing like the home I remembered. Kevin greeted me at the door with a politician's smile. Linda, glad you could make it. Let's talk after the speeches, okay? I think we can find a solution that works for everyone. Where's Mama? I asked. Resting. The excitement is too much for her. He patted my shoulder. She doesn't even know what day it is, poor thing. I smiled back. Of course. I waited through the cocktail hour, through the speeches from the Whitfield executives, through Kevin's self-congratulatory toast about honoring the family legacy while embracing the future. The crowd applauded. The commissioner shook his hand. Cameras flashed. Then Kevin called for everyone's attention for one final announcement. That was my cue. I stepped up onto the small stage that had been erected near the barn. Kevin's smile faltered. Linda, what are you doing? I took the microphone from his hand. I'd like to say a few words about the Patterson family legacy. The crowd murmured. Kevin reached for the microphone, but I stepped back, out of his reach. 12 years ago, I left this farm to work overseas. I trusted my brother Kevin to care for our mother and our family home. I sent money every month, over $200,000 total. I called every Sunday. I believed my family was being taken care of. I paused, letting the silence build. 3 weeks ago, I came home unannounced. I found my 72-year-old mother on her hands and knees, scrubbing steps with a toothbrush. I found her sleeping in a converted utility closet with a bucket for a toilet. I found her so overmedicated that she barely recognized her own daughter. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Kevin's face went purple. She's lying, he shouted. She's delusional. She hasn't been home in 12 years. She doesn't know what she's talking about. I reached into my bag and pulled out a folder. I have documentation, forged prescriptions, financial records showing misappropriation of over $800,000, testimony from Dr. Herbert Crane, who is prepared to state in court that the medications administered to my mother were deliberately altered to cause cognitive impairment. The Whitfield executive stepped forward, looking pale. "What is this?" "Kevin, you assured us the property was unencumbered." "It is," Kevin sputtered. "She's making this up. Mom signed everything over willingly." I pulled out the letter. My mother's letter, written in her shaky handwriting. "This is a statement from Patricia Ann Patterson, hidden in a mason jar in the basement of this house 2 years ago, when she still had moments of clarity. In it, she describes being forced to sign documents under duress, being physically confined, being treated as a slave in her own home." I read the letter aloud. By the end, half the crowd was in tears. The newspaper photographer was snapping pictures. The county commissioner had taken 3 steps back from Kevin, as if proximity itself was contaminating. "But here's the part you really need to hear," I said, looking directly at the Whitfield executive. "This property cannot be legally sold. My father's original will, which I also found in that basement, established this land as a family trust. It can only be sold if both children agree in writing, and the proceeds must go to the surviving spouse's care. Kevin's guardianship gives him control of Mama's finances, not ownership of the land. Every document he's signed with you is fraudulent." The Whitfield executive turned to Kevin. "Is this true?" Kevin was shaking now, sweat pouring down his face. "She's lying. It's a forgery. She created those documents to steal what's rightfully mine." "Yours?" I stepped toward him. "You don't own anything here, Kevin. You never did. You're a thief, a liar, and an abuser. And in about 30 seconds, you're going to be under arrest." Right on cue, 2 sheriff's deputies stepped out from behind the catering tent. They'd been waiting there for an hour, listening to everything through the microphone I was wearing. "Kevin Patterson," the lead deputy said, "you're under arrest for elder abuse, fraud, and financial exploitation. You have the right to remain silent." Diane tried to run. She made it about 10 feet before a deputy caught her arm. She screamed, cursed, blamed everyone but herself. Classic Diane. The crowd watched in stunned silence as my brother and his wife were handcuffed and led to waiting patrol cars. The Whitfield executive was on the phone, already calling his lawyers. The commissioner was giving a statement to the newspaper reporter, expressing his shock and demanding an investigation into how the guardianship was approved. But I didn't care about any of them. I walked into the house, past the leather furniture and the flat-screen TV, past the new hardwood floors, back to that utility room. The door was open. Mama was sitting on the cot, hands folded in her lap, waiting. "Mama," I said softly, "it's over. They're gone." She looked up at me, and for the first time in weeks, her eyes were clear. The fog was lifting. Dr. Crane's correct prescriptions were finally working, flushing the poison from her system. "I heard the commotion," she whispered. "Did you find the jars?" "I found them, Mama. I found everything." She smiled, a real smile, the one I remembered from childhood when she'd tuck me in at night. "I knew you'd come. I told myself every day, Linda will come. She always comes when I need her." I helped her up from that cot, that prison she'd endured for years. I walked her through the house, through the front door, out onto the porch where the August sun was setting over the peach trees. The party guests had scattered. The tents stood empty. The champagne was going flat. But the farm was still here. The trees were still heavy with fruit, and Mama was still alive. That night, I slept in my old bedroom for the first time in 12 years. Mama slept in the master suite, in clean sheets, with the windows open and the summer breeze carrying the scent of peaches. No locks, no buckets, no toothbrushes. The next morning, I called a real estate lawyer. Not to sell the farm, to protect it. We established a new trust, ironclad and unbreakable, ensuring the land would stay in the family for generations. The peach orchard would continue. Mama would live out her days in the home she loved. Kevin and Diane were charged with 12 counts of elder abuse, financial fraud, and falsifying legal documents. The guardianship was immediately revoked. Dr. Crane cooperated fully with the investigation and kept his license, though he volunteered at a free clinic for 2 years as penance. The Whitfield deal collapsed, and the company quietly moved on to other projects. As for me, I stayed. I'd spent 12 years chasing money in the desert, thinking I was building something for the future. But the future was here, in Georgia, in the red clay earth, and the pink blossoms, and the woman who'd never stopped believing I'd come home. 1 year later, Mama and I sat on the porch at sunset. Her mind had mostly returned, though some memories were gone forever. Casualties of the chemical war Kevin had waged on her brain. But she remembered what mattered. She remembered the taste of fresh peaches. She remembered Daddy's laugh. She remembered that her daughter had come when she needed her. "Linda," she said, reaching for my hand, "I want to do something for other folks. Other old folks who don't have anyone to come for them." I looked at her. "What are you thinking? This house is too big for just us. There's the old guest cottage and the converted barn. We could fix them up. Take in some women like me, ones whose families threw them away. Give them a place to live, to be respected, to eat at a real table and sleep in a real bed." I squeezed her hand. "Mama, that's a beautiful idea." We started the Patterson House Foundation that spring. In the first year, we took in 9 women, all of them survivors of elder abuse. The local church donated furniture. The high school shop class built accessible ramps. A retired chef from Atlanta volunteered to cook Sunday dinners. On the 1-year anniversary of Kevin's arrest, I got a letter from the state prison. It was from my brother, asking for forgiveness, asking for another chance, asking me to visit. I read the letter carefully. Then I folded it up, walked to the fireplace, and watched it burn. Some bridges can't be rebuilt. Some betrayals can't be forgiven. Not because I'm hard-hearted, but because forgiveness isn't the same as trust, and trust, once shattered, leaves shards too sharp to ever hold again. But I didn't hate him. I pitied him. He'd had everything, a mother who loved him, a sister who would have died for him, a farm that could have sustained generations, and he'd traded it all for quick cash and temporary power. Now he had nothing but a cell and his own conscience. Mama passed away peacefully 3 years later, in her own bed, in her own home, surrounded by the women who'd become her second family. She was 80 years old. The peach trees were in full bloom that April morning, their petals drifting past her window like pink snow. At her funeral, more than 200 people came. Women from the foundation, neighbors, caregivers, the grocery store cashier who'd slipped Mama an extra peach every Saturday, the deputy who'd helped make the arrest. They all had stories about Patricia Patterson, about her kindness, her strength, her stubborn refusal to give up, even when the world tried to erase her. I gave the eulogy. I told them about the mason jars, about the letter she'd hidden when she could barely remember her own name, about how she'd fought, in the only way she could, to survive until help arrived. And I told them this, the words I'd carried in my heart since that August afternoon when I found her on her knees. My mother taught me that love isn't just a feeling, it's a choice. It's showing up when things get hard. It's fighting for the people who can't fight for themselves. It's hiding your hope in a mason jar and trusting that someday, someone will find it. I looked out at the crowd, at the faces wet with tears. She trusted me, and I will spend the rest of my life trying to be worthy of that trust. That night, I sat alone on the porch, watching the fireflies dance over the orchard. The house was quiet. The foundation residents had gone to bed. The summer air smelled of peaches and possibility. I pulled out my phone and read the latest message from the foundation's website. A woman in Alabama, her son had taken her house. Could we help? I typed back, "Yes, we can help. We always can." Then I closed my eyes and listened to the crickets sing, thinking about mason jars and second chances and the fierce, unbreakable love of a mother who never stopped believing her daughter would come home. I'm so glad you stayed with me through this story. If it touched your heart, please like the video and subscribe to my channel. Let me know in the comments where you're watching from. I love hearing from all of you. And if you know someone who's been through something like this, share this video with them. Sometimes, knowing you're not alone is the first step toward finding your way home. I'll see you in the next story.